I never thought a simple closet cleanup would end with my boyfriend asking to watch me use my vibrator. Honestly, if you told me that last week, I'd have laughed and said, "No way, that's way too awkward." But here we are, and I still can't believe how it all went down. So, let me back up a bit. My name's Ethan, I'm 27, and I've been dating Jake for about 4 months now. Things have been going pretty smoothly. He's smart, funny, and somehow really patient with my terrible taste in movies. We live together in this tiny apartment in the city, which is great, except we're both incredibly messy, and our closet is basically a black hole of clothes, shoes, and mystery boxes. Last Saturday, I decided it was time to tackle that disaster zone. I figured if I could get the closet sorted, maybe I'd feel a bit less like a walking tornado of chaos. Jake was out running errands, so I had the place to myself. I pulled everything out, tossing clothes over my bed, trying to separate what I wanted to keep from what needed to be donated or tossed. That's when I found it. The little purple silicone vibrator I'd tucked away months ago, buried behind a stack of old t-shirts. I remember picking it up, feeling that weird mix of embarrassment and a little thrill. I'd never really hidden it from Jake, but it wasn't exactly front and center either. I figured it was private, something I hadn't felt the need to share yet. I laughed quietly to myself, thinking about how silly it was to get so nervous about something so normal. Just as I was about to put it back, the closet door creaked open, and there was Jake, standing there with that half smile he gets when he's caught me doing something ridiculous. "Hey," he said, a little breathless like he'd been rushing. "So what's this?" My heart did that stupid little flutter a guy gets when he's caught off guard. I could feel my face heat up as I held the toy out, and he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Instead of making a joke or an awkward comment, Jake just looked at me, really looked like he was trying to figure out why I was so tense about something so simple. Then, without a hint of judgment, he said, "Can I watch you use it sometime?" I blinked. I'm not even sure I processed the words right the first time. I mean, I knew we were close, but that request hit me like a curveball. "Wait, what?" I stammered, still clutching the purple toy like it was some kind of secret weapon. He shrugged, smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You don't have to say yes, but I'm curious. I want to see that side of you." It's kind of closeness-y, honestly. And just like that, the closet cleanup turned into something way more interesting and way more vulnerable than I ever expected. I could feel my cheeks burning, and I wasn't even sure if it was embarrassment or just the surprise of hearing Jake say something so openly. I mean, we'd talked about a lot of stuff since we moved in, but this was different. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't expected. I shifted on my feet, glancing down at the toy in my hand like it suddenly became this alien object. "I don't know, man. That's kind of personal." Jake nodded, raising his hands a little, like he was trying to show he wasn't about to push me into anything. "Yeah, I get that. I'm not trying to pressure you or anything. I just want to be closer to you. To all of you." He grinned softly, and honestly, it melted some of the tension. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair. "It just feels weird. Like, I don't know if I'm ready for you to see that side of me. I've never really shared that part with anyone before." "That's fair," he said quietly. "But if I'm someone you want to be with, I want to learn everything that makes you, well, you. And if that means seeing you in these moments, then I'm here." There was this raw honesty in his voice that caught me off guard. It wasn't just a casual comment or a joke, it was something real, something I didn't realize I wanted until he said it. We stood there in the closet for a moment, the pile of clothes forgotten, the air thick with something unspoken. Then Jake stepped forward and tucked a loose strand of my hair behind my ear, like he'd done 100 times before. "Whenever you're ready," he said softly. I swallowed hard, feeling my heart beat a little faster than usual. "Okay," I whispered, surprised at how easy it was to say it out loud. He smiled, that easy, genuine smile that made me feel like maybe this was going to be okay. "No pressure, just whenever you want." After that, the rest of the day felt lighter. I finished cleaning the closet, but my mind kept drifting back to that conversation. It wasn't just about the vibrator. It was about trust, about feeling safe enough to be myself, completely. with someone else. The next few days, I found myself watching Jake in a new way. There was this quiet confidence in him, this patience that made me feel like maybe I didn't have to hide anything. Even the stuff I thought was too embarrassing or weird or private. One night, a few days later, we were lying on the couch, binge watching some dumb comedy and sharing a bowl of popcorn. Jake looked over at me with that same soft smile and asked, "So, about that closet thing, you still thinking about it?" I laughed, a little nervous but mostly amused. Yeah, I mean, it's probably the weirdest thing I've ever considered doing with someone else. He nudged me gently. Weirder than me dancing in the kitchen like a maniac? Definitely, I said, grinning. He laughed, and then the room got quieter. But seriously, if you want, maybe we can try it sometime. No pressure, like I said. I felt my stomach flip-flopping, the mix of nerves and excitement making my heartbeat loud in my ears. Maybe, I said, feeling the honesty in my own voice. We kept watching the show, but the idea lingered in the back of my mind like a secret window opening to something new. A few nights later, after we finished dinner and the apartment was quiet, Jake turned to me and said, "If you want, I'm here. No rush, but whenever you're ready." That simple offer was like an invitation to trust him more than I ever had before. It wasn't just about the toy. It was about letting someone in, about sharing parts of myself I'd always kept locked up. And so, slowly, I started to think about what it would mean to open that door, to let Jake see me in a way I'd never shown anyone else. The thought was scary and thrilling all at once. I guess I'm not really sure what I expected when I said yes, but looking back, it was the moment things between us shifted. The moment I realized that with Jake, I could be completely real, even the messy, awkward, vulnerable parts. That night, I finally pulled the vibrator out again, sitting on the edge of the bed with my heart pounding. And when Jake came over, sat beside me, and reached for my hand, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. Jake sat next to me on the bed, close but not crowding me. I could feel his presence, steady, calm, patient, and it made the whole idea of being completely exposed a little less terrifying. I held the vibrator in my hand, turning it over slowly, feeling the cool silicone against my fingers. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioner, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was about to burst out laughing or cry from nerves. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jake asked softly, eyes searching mine like he really wanted to know. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I want to try." He smiled, squeezing my hand gently. "Okay, no rush, no pressure. Just tell me if you want me to stop." I took a deep breath and laid back on the bed, propping my head up on a pillow. Jake moved a little closer, and I could feel the warmth of his body against mine. My heart was pounding, but the nervousness was starting to mix with excitement. I switched the vibrator on, the soft buzzing filling the space between USAs. I began. Jake watched quietly, his eyes never leaving my face. There was something about the way he looked at me, curious but respectful, like he was honored to be let in on something so intimate. No awkwardness, no judgment, just this shared moment that felt kind of sacred. "Is it okay if I watch you like this?" he asked after a bit, voice low and gentle. I nodded, feeling more at ease than I expected. "Yeah, I like it." It was strange, but also kind of amazing. Having him there, witnessing this part of me that I'd usually keep hidden, made me feel closer to him in a way I hadn't before. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, like a secret we were sharing. After a while, I turned off the vibrator, and Jake leaned in, kissing me softly. There was no rush, no pressure, just this quiet, tender connection that made me feel safe. "Thank you for trusting me," he murmured against my lips. "Thank you for asking," I replied, smiling. That night changed something between us. It wasn't just about the vibrator anymore. It was about breaking down walls and letting someone see all the messy, vulnerable parts. And Jake? He didn't just accept them, he embraced them. In the days and weeks that followed, our relationship deepened. We talked more openly about our desires, our fears, and all the little things that make us who we are. It wasn't always easy, and sometimes I still felt awkward or uncertain, but Jake's patience and kindness made all the difference. One evening, A few weeks after that first night, we found ourselves back in the closet. This time, it wasn't about cleaning or surprises. It was just us, standing shoulder to shoulder among the clothes. I was thinking, Jake said, pulling me close. Maybe we could explore more of this together. Not just watching, but together. I looked up at him, heart pounding again, but this time with anticipation instead of fear. I'd like that, I said honestly. And just like that, the closet that once felt like a chaotic mess became a place of new beginnings, a space where we could be ourselves, completely and unapologetically. Looking back, I never would have guessed that finding a forgotten toy in a messy closet would lead to something so real and beautiful. But that's the thing about love, isn't it? It shows up in the most unexpected places, if you're brave enough to let it in. After that night in the closet, things between Jake and me started shifting in ways I never really anticipated. It wasn't just the toy sessions, if you will. It was the way our entire dynamic felt more honest, more open. Like we'd crossed some invisible line and suddenly, all the walls I'd built around myself started to crumble down a little. I remember one lazy Sunday afternoon, we were sprawled out on the couch, the sunlight filtering in through the blinds, casting those striped shadows on the floor. Jake was scrolling through his phone and I was just watching him, marveling at how comfortable I felt around him. It hit me then, how much I'd been holding back in past relationships, how scared I was of judgment or rejection. I've never really shared a lot of this stuff with anyone before, I said quietly, biting my lip as I tried to find the words. Not just the, stuff with the vibrator, but everything. My insecurities, what I like, what scares me. Jake looked over, his eyes soft but steady. I'm honored you're telling me. I want to know it all, Ethan. The good, the messy, the weird. I smiled, feeling this warmth spread through my chest. Sometimes I'm just afraid it's too much. That people see me and think, wow, this guy's a lot. Jake shrugged, grinning. Well, too bad for them, because I'm pretty sure you're worth a lot more than that. It was the kind of moment that stayed with me, the kind that made me realize this wasn't just some fling or casual thing. This was something real. The more I let Jake in, the more he showed me how safe it felt to be vulnerable. And honestly, that scared me almost as much as it excited me, because opening up means risking getting hurt, but with him, I wanted to take that risk. One night, we were in bed, him reading a book, me scrolling through Reddit on my phone, when I suddenly blurted out, "Can I ask you something a little embarrassing?" Jake looked up, eyebrows raised. "You're embarrassing me already, and I haven't even heard it yet." I laughed nervously. "Okay, so have you ever used a toy before?" He grinned, putting the book down. "Actually, yeah, I have. Didn't think you'd be so curious." "Curious?" "More like fascinated." "Why didn't you ever mention it?" "Guess I wasn't sure how you'd react. But now that we've talked about it, I'm glad we're on the same page." That night, we ended up swapping stories about our experiences, what we liked and didn't like, and I realized just how much we'd been keeping to ourselves before. It was like we were peeling back layers, bit by bit, and every conversation made me feel even closer to him. Things started to get more playful, too. Jake began leaving little notes around the apartment, sometimes with cheeky comments or teasing suggestions about trying new things together. Like the time I found a Post-it stuck to the bathroom mirror that said, "Next time, you're sharing the remote and maybe the vibe." I couldn't stop laughing. The vibe itself got upgraded eventually. Jake surprised me with a new model he'd researched online, and the way he presented it was so sweet and nervous, like he was giving me a prize rather than a closeness toy. That night, we tried it out together, his hand in mine, and it was a whole new level of intimacy. Not just physical, but emotional too. But it wasn't always perfect. There were moments when old insecurities would creep in, like the time I accidentally knocked the toy off the nightstand, and it made this loud clatter. I froze, expecting Jake to make a joke, or worse, look at me like I was some kind of freak. Instead, he just laughed and said, "Well, that's one way to make an entrance." That kind of acceptance made me realize how lucky I was. How lucky I was to find someone who could not only handle my quirks, but actually celebrate them. One afternoon, I was cooking dinner and Jake was in the living room, music playing softly. I caught him watching me from across the room, this goofy smile on his face. When I asked what was up, he said, "Just thinking how crazy it is that something as silly as a little toy in the closet could bring us closer." I nodded, stirring the sauce. "Yeah, who knew?" He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me from behind. I did. I leaned back into him, feeling that familiar contentment settle over me. "I'm glad you found it." "Me too," he whispered. And honestly, I never thought I'd say this, but finding that toy in the closet turned out to be one of the best things that's ever happened to us. It opened the door to a level of connection I didn't know was possible, and every day since has been a little bit more real, a little bit more us. Sometimes love sneaks up on you in the strangest ways, and when it does, you just have to let it in. A couple of weeks after that cooking moment, something else happened that made me realize just how far we'd come, and how much more there was to explore together. We were lying in bed on a Friday night, the kind of lazy evening where neither of us felt like talking much, just content to exist in the same space. I was scrolling through my phone when Jake suddenly sat up and looked at me with that thoughtful expression he gets when he's about to say something serious but doesn't want to make a big deal out of it. "Hey," he said, voice soft. "Can I tell you something I've been thinking about?" I put my phone down and nodded, giving him my full attention. "It's about us, and, well, everything we've been exploring." He paused, fingers nervously fiddling with the hem of the blanket. "I guess I just want to make sure you're okay with how things are going. Like, I don't want you to feel pressured or anything. If you ever want to slow down or change the way we do things, just tell me." That caught me a little off guard. Sure, I'd felt the shift in our relationship, but I hadn't really thought about how Jake might be interpreting it all. I smiled and reached over to take his hand. "I'm really okay. More than okay, actually. I felt like I can be myself around you in ways I never could before." His eyes softened, and he squeezed my hand. "That means a lot, because I want us to keep being honest, even if it's messy or awkward sometimes." "I want that too," I said. "Really?" There was a quiet moment between us, filled with that kind of peaceful contentment that only comes when you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Then Jake shifted a little, resting his head on my shoulder. "You know," he murmured, "I was thinking maybe next weekend we could try something new. Together." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Like what?" He hesitated, then grinned mischievously. "Well, maybe we could pick out a toy together. Something that's for both of us. Something we can use together." I blinked. "That's actually kind of exciting." Jake chuckled. "I thought you might think so, but if it feels too soon, no worries." "No, I want to," I said, surprising even myself with how eager I was. "I want to see where this can go." "With you." He kissed my temple, and I felt that familiar rush of warmth spread through me. The next weekend, we headed to a small boutique a few blocks from our apartment. I was nervous at first, walking into a closeness shop, picking out toys together. It all felt a little foreign territory, but Jake's easygoing attitude made it less intimidating. We wandered the aisles slowly, poking and prodding, making low jokes, and asking the clerk questions like a couple of clueless kids. Eventually, we settled on a couple of things: a sleek, remote-controlled toy that we could use together, and a little set of massage oils that smelled like lavender and something woodsy. The clerk wrapped everything up with a wink and said, "Have fun." Back at the apartment, we unpacked our haul on the kitchen table, awkward smiles and laughter filling the room. I remember holding the remote in my hand and looking over at Jake, who caught my eye and grinned. "This is going to be interesting," he said, voice low and playful. We took it slow, testing things out over the next few days. The remote toy added this whole new dimension to our connection, playing with control and trust in ways that felt thrilling and intimate. There were moments when I'd feel his gaze on me, or sense his breath catch, and it made everything feel electric. One night, after a particularly long day at work, we found ourselves curled up on the couch. Jake had the remote hidden in his pocket, a sly smile on his face. He pressed a button, and the toy buzzed softly against me. I gasped, looking at him with mock indignation. "Really? Right now?" He laughed, pulling me closer. "It's payback for stealing my fries last night." That kind of playful teasing became a regular thing. It brought a new layer to our relationship that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced before. But it wasn't just the toys or the physical stuff. It was the way we talked about everything. Our pasts, our hopes, the little things that scared us. One night, laying in bed after a long conversation, Jake said something that stuck. "I love how you're not afraid to be real with me." That honesty, it's rare, I smiled, resting my head against his chest. I think I've been scared to be that real with anyone before, but with you, it feels safe. He kissed my forehead. That's what I want us to be. Safe. And more. And at that moment, I knew that finding that toy in the closet was just the beginning. What came after, the trust, the laughter, the quiet moments of understanding, was what really mattered. Love isn't always perfect or easy. Sometimes it's awkward, messy, and unexpected. But with Jake, it's exactly what I needed. And I'm more than ready to see where this journey takes us next. A few nights after that conversation, I was lying in bed, half awake, when Jake stirred next to me. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city outside our window. I felt the weight of his hand settle on my waist, fingers tracing lazy circles that made my skin tingle. "I've been thinking," he whispered, voice low and a little hesitant. "About us, about how much I want to keep building this, whatever it is." I turned my head to look at him, catching the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "Me too. It feels like we're discovering something new every day." He smiled, the kind of smile that felt like a promise. "And I want to keep exploring, not just the fun stuff, but the hard stuff too. The things we don't always say out loud." I nodded, feeling that familiar mix of excitement and nervousness settle in my chest. "Yeah, I get that. Sometimes it's easier to hide the messy parts, but with you, I want to try." Jake shifted, pulling the blanket up over us both as he settled in closer. "We don't have to have it all figured out right now. Just knowing we're in this together makes it easier." That night, I fell asleep thinking about how rare it was to find someone who made vulnerability feel like strength, not weakness. The next day, we decided to take a break from our usual routine and go for a hike up the trails near the edge of the city. It was a crisp autumn morning, the leaves crunching underfoot and painting the path in reds and golds. Jake and I walked side by side, the silence between us comfortable. Halfway up, we found a clearing with a view of the skyline peeking through the trees. Jake stopped and looked out, then glanced back at me with a soft smile. "You know," he said, "I was thinking about how much this feels like us. Climbing bit by bit, sometimes slow, sometimes steady, but always moving forward." I laughed softly. "That's pretty poetic for you." He shrugged. "Hey, I'm full of surprises." We sat on a fallen log, and I took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. "I'm glad we're doing this together." "Me too." He leaned his head on my shoulder, and for a while we just sat there, letting the moment stretch without needing words. Back at the apartment later that evening, things took a turn that neither of us expected. We were cooking dinner. Well, Jake was cooking, and I was attempting to not burn the garlic bread when the power suddenly went out. The whole building plunged into darkness, and for a second, I panicked, fumbling for my phone. Jake laughed softly and pulled me toward the living room. "Come on, it's just a blackout. Let's make the best of it." He found some candles in the kitchen drawer, lighting a few and setting them around the room. The soft flicker cast warm shadows, turning our chaotic apartment into this cozy little sanctuary. We sat on the floor, surrounded by candlelight, and Jake pulled me close. The electricity might have been out, but somehow the energy between us was more electric than ever. "As long as I'm with you, I don't need power," he whispered. I smiled, my heart pounding. "You're cheeseball central tonight," he grinned, brushing a stray hair from my face. Guilty as charged. That night, surrounded by candlelight and silence, we talked for hours about our pasts, our dreams, our fears. It was the kind of conversation that peeled back layers, revealing parts of ourselves we hadn't shared before. A few days later, Jake surprised me by setting up a little date night in our living room. He'd strung fairy lights across the ceiling, laid out a blanket and pillows, and even made a playlist of songs he knew I loved. I walked in after work and stopped, stunned by the effort he'd put in. "What's all this?" I asked, grinning. "Just thought we could have a night to celebrate us. No distractions, just you and me." We curled up together, letting the music wash over us. As the night went on, the conversation shifted naturally to fantasies and curiosities. Jake shared some things I hadn't known about him before, and I found myself opening up in ways I never thought I could. At one point, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the remote for our toy. Want to try something? My breath caught, but I nodded. He leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. Just relax. I've got you. The teasing buzz started softly, and I felt a rush of warmth and anticipation. Having him in control was strangely comforting, like a metaphor for the trust we'd built. Afterward, we lay tangled together, the air thick with tenderness and satisfaction. Over the next few weeks, our connection deepened in ways I couldn't have predicted. We weren't just lovers or roommates anymore. We were partners in the truest sense. We supported each other through work stress, celebrated small victories, and found joy in the everyday moments. One evening, as we were winding down after dinner, Jake looked at me with that familiar mix of affection and something else, something serious. "Ethan, I know we're still figuring things out, but I want you to know I'm in this for the long haul. I'm not going anywhere." I felt a lump rise in my throat, overwhelmed by how lucky I was to hear those words. "I'm in too," I said, voice thick. "More than I ever thought I could be." He smiled, and we leaned into each other, the kind of quiet connection that doesn't need words. Finding that toy in the closet was the start of something unexpected. Yes, but it was the trust, the honesty, and the willingness to be vulnerable together that made this love real. And honestly, I can't wait to see where it takes us next. A few months have passed since that night in the closet. The night that, honestly, felt like a turning point in more ways than one. Looking back, I realized it wasn't about the toy itself, but about what it represented: trust, openness, and the willingness to be seen in all my awkward, vulnerable glory. With Jake, I found a space where I didn't have to pretend or hold back. Last weekend, we celebrated our anniversary quietly at home. No grand gestures or fancy dinners. Just the two of us, cooking together, laughing over some terribly cheesy movie, and winding down with the toy that started it all. It felt perfect in its simplicity. Afterwards, we sat on the couch, wrapped up in a blanket, and I caught Jake's hand in mine. He looked over at me, eyes soft and steady, and said, "I'm grateful you let me in. The real you, all of it." I squeezed his hand gently. "I'm grateful too, for your patience, your kindness, and for making me feel safe." There was this peaceful silence between us, the kind that feels full without needing to be filled. I thought about how far we'd come, from a messy closet filled with forgotten things to a relationship built on honesty and genuine connection. I realized then that love, in its best form, isn't about perfection or grand declarations. It's about showing up day after day, choosing to be open, and finding joy in the little moments. It's about being brave enough to let someone see you, really see you, and still feeling like you belong. Jake leaned in and kissed me softly, and I smiled against his lips, feeling completely at home. Whatever comes next, I know we'll face it together. Because this isn't just about a toy or a moment, it's about us, and that feels like the most real thing in the world.